Thanks everyone for coming today. My name is Brianna. I'm the Orientation and Mobility Specialist at the Braille Institute in Santa Barbara, and we are excited to have you all here today. We've got a great turnout. The topic is human guide techniques. We will also be discussing ways to adapt them to our current pandemic. So we'll be reviewing the techniques and then different creative ways to adapt them. I'm also going to talk about just general things to consider when interacting with someone with vision loss. We've got a bunch of students here today from Braille. We have their family and friends. We have outside educators and Braille Institute staff. So it's great to have such an eclectic bunch. Welcome, everyone. And I'm going to do my best to share a lot of these slides. So I'll be sharing a screen and then I'll also be describing them so that people can follow along. So my first slide or kind of topic is going to be how to communicate effectively with people with vision loss. And this was an online resource that I adapted from the Vision Australia website. And I can share a lot of these with everyone after our webinar with a follow-up email. So keep that in mind so you're not having to rush and write things down. So the thing I want to start out with is things to consider when communicating with someone with vision loss or interacting with someone with vision loss. Obviously, you want to just treat them like you would anyone else. Be relaxed, be yourself, act naturally. You also want to consider the fact that they might not be able to recognize you by just your voice. So you want to identify yourself, speak, when you're entering a room, let them know, hi, it's Brianna, I'm here on your right, or, just letting them know who you are. Speak naturally and clearly. The loss of eyesight does not mean the loss of hearing. So I've seen that quite a bit, and I'm sure a lot of you on the webinar today may have experienced that as well, where people kind of raise their voice. So just speak naturally. Continue to use, your body language and however you communicate. This can affect the tone of your voice and give extra information to the person who's visually impaired. So there's not too much different other than that you want to be a little more descriptive in your explanation of things. You also want to use everyday language. You don't need to avoid words like see or look. You can talk just like you would about did you see that show yesterday, or did you look at that sign? It doesn't matter that someone may not actually see it with their eyes, but they might see it in a different way. So using those normal words, no problem. Naming the person that you are speaking to when you're introducing yourself, especially if you're in a group setting, you want to say, hey, Karen, I was wondering what you did yesterday when, so just addressing who you're talking to first, because a lot of times as sighted people are used to just looking at the person and then it's obvious that you're directing the question to them. So naming the person that you're talking to, talk directly to the person with vision loss. You never want to channel a conversation through a third person. In a group situation, sometimes it's nice to introduce the other people that are around, informing the person with vision loss before you leave. It's a great thing to consider. The other thing is to use accurate and specific language when you're giving directions. Instead of saying over there, you might say the door is on your left rather than the door is over there. I like to use the direction walk towards my voice. Walk towards my voice is a great way, or another thing to think about when giving directions. Avoid situations where there's competing noise. It can be really distracting when there's a lot of outside noises, if possible. And always, we'll talk about this later in context of guiding, but always ask before helping. Don't assume that because someone has a disability or has vision loss that they need your help, even if they may look like they're disoriented, or they might look like they're, you know, getting lost in a corner of a room with their cane tapping. That might be their way of locating a certain piece of information to keep their orientation. You never know. So just always ask first. Another tip for giving orientation is using the clock face orientation tool. So we often see this when serving someone with vision loss a dish. You might say the meat is positioned at 6 o'clock on the dinner plate. Your water glass is at 12 o'clock, type something like that. The use of the human guide technique when guiding a person with vision loss, you want to always offer your arm, and we'll talk more about the specifics on how to go about offering your assistance as a guide. Lastly, we just say do not pet or distract working guide dogs. They're busy working, so distracting them by saying hi to them, even, offering them a little pet or a treat is obviously not a good thing to do when their job is to be guiding their owner. The last thing here on my slide is to use people first language. No one wants to be labeled by how they are different or by their disability. So we always want to say a person who is blind or a person who has vision loss versus that blind person or that visually impaired person. So people first language. All right, so that's just some general communication tips. And now we're going to go into the human guide techniques. So let me grab the pamphlet. And again, this pamphlet that I'm going to share is located on our website under the orientation and mobility page. The first one I have is general guide techniques, and then we'll discuss how to adapt these to the current pandemic. So a lot of these can stay the same when you're working with someone that you've already, decided you're quarantining with, or you're willing to kind of be physically touching this other person. So with the human guide techniques, there's going to be physical touch. That's why we've had to think of ways to adapt that. This first pamphlet here, I'm going to talk about how we can be the guide, and also how the traveler is going to be, what the role of the traveler is and what the role of the guide is for these techniques. So there's various situations that come up for people with vision loss where they may decide that they need a guide. You as the guide, it's always your responsibility to ask whether the person needs assistance. Like we mentioned, or like I mentioned earlier, you never want to assume, and just ask before you help. And then you want to introduce yourself. If you've determined that they could use assistance, the guide can then place the back of their hand on the back of the traveler's hand. This allows the traveler to know where your arm is in space. You don't want to have an awkward scenario where the person with vision loss is reaching out trying to find your arm and accidentally grabs a different part of your body. This is to ensure that they know where your arm is. So this is a very important piece, making contact. So as the traveler, you really don't need to be reaching out trying to locate that. The guide's job is to place the back of their hand on the back of your hand. So I've covered both roles there, the traveler and the guide. The guide should not be grabbing or pulling at the traveler. The guide just makes contact by placing the back of their hand to the traveler's hand, and then from there, once the traveler has a sense of where the guide's arm is, they can trail their hand up the back, or using the back of their hand, trail their hand up the arm of the guide to locate the back of their guide's elbow. So now we're going to talk about the grasp. How do you hold on to the back of the guide's elbow? So some people learn to think of holding on to a can where you have the thumb wrapped around one side of the arm and all the rest of the hands wrapped around the other in this C grasp, as if you're holding a bottle of some kind. So the traveler should grasp the guide's arm just above the elbow with his fingers on the inside of the guide's arm and the thumb on the outside. There's a photo on this slide showing that, and the guide's arm can stay relaxed down by their side. The traveler's elbow is about 90 degrees in a bent angle. This allows for the traveler to feel the guide's movements as they're walking. So that's the grasp. The next thing we want to talk about is that grasp may not be accessible for everyone. So there are some ways to modify this. And I'm going to pause for a moment and just make sure that everyone's with me. We're hearing a little bit of background sound, so I'm going to go ahead and mute a couple of these microphones. All right. So support grasp. The standard grasp, like I mentioned, is behind the upper elbow, tricep area. If the traveler needs a little more support, maybe they have balance issues, maybe they normally use a support cane or a walker, and they need assistance where they don't have that device, or they might even just need extra support even with their support cane. This is a good grasp. It's called the support grasp. And rather than holding the guide's arm above the elbow, the traveler can link his arm with the guide's arm. And where the picture here is of the traveler linking the arm on the inside and then wrapping it around and over the forearm of the guide. So the guide's arm is, in this case, it is bent. So that way the traveler can put more weight on the support of the guide's forearm. So that is the support grasp. The modified grasp for a child, we have some things in place because there could be a height difference. If the regular grasp is not comfortable, you can have the traveler grasp the guide by their wrist, or they can hold onto fingers if they're really small. They can also hold onto the shoulder of the guide, especially if the traveler is taller than the guide. And that is a common one, the shoulder stance. The guide should always use a slower pace using these modified grasp than with the standard regular grasp. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the stance and how to position your bodies. The guide should hold their arm relaxed and steady at their side, as pictured in the photo number 5. The traveler should be next to the guide as he walks and stays about a half a step behind their guide. The guide should provide information about the ground so that the traveler does not trip or over any sort of uneven surface or variation in the ground. So the stance, again, the traveler is going to be next to the guide where in this case, the traveler's left shoulder is about a half a step behind the guide's right shoulder. Okay, so that way the guide is always ahead, guiding the person before the traveler gets to whatever scenario it is. So the guide is supposed to be from the front. You never want the guide from the back pushing the traveler. So we've seen that before, and that's one of those no-nos. The next thing we're going to discuss is the narrow passage. When you get to a narrow area, and standing side by side like that is not conducive to going through narrow doorways or things like that. How do you get through that? So when you're in a narrow area, a lot of times the guide will have to say, we're coming up to a narrow space. The guide will then place the arm that the traveler is holding behind their low back. This cues the traveler to then slide their arm down to the wrist of their guide, and then the traveler will extend their arm straight to create more space between them and their guide. The guide so again, the guide is moving their forearm and hand to rest behind their low back. The palm will now face outward. The guide's arm is bent about 90 degrees. It's kind of I think personally that it's a stretch. My shoulder, I tend to feel like I'm relatively limber, but even for me, this is kind of a stretch for me. So if this is not possible for you as the guide, have the student place their hand on your shoulder, and then they can extend their arm straight. And they want to be directly behind you, so they'll have to slide their hand from their shoulder maybe a little further towards your back of your neck or upper back area, just to keep contact with you. But having the traveler directly behind you is key, because you don't want them to be hitting their shoulder on any of this narrow space. So you can walk slower during these narrow spaces to ensure that no one's hitting anything. And again, this is for going through doorways, even a crowded area, any kind of narrow space. The next piece of guiding, which I think tends to get confusing and requires a lot of practice, is doorways. So the proper way to go through doors. And I think a lot of this has to do with just describing and what words to use that make sense in your head, because a lot of times my idea of a door moving out or away from me might be a different word for someone else. But I tend to like to use the wording away from me and towards me. Some people say out and in, but you want to have that down so that it makes sense for you and your traveler. So as the guide, when you're coming up to a doorway, you're going to let them know, okay, we're coming up to a door, and let the traveler know which way the door is going. Is it going out, in, left, right, away from you, towards you? You have to describe that door. So the photo number 7 on this slide shows a door going away and to the left. So I would say, okay, we're coming up to a doorway. The traveler would then assume the narrow passage position. And when you say the door is going away and to the left, now the traveler can visualize that door and know which of their free hand needs to be up to protect them from the door shutting on them. So once the guide is saying the door is away and to the left, now as the traveler, I know I need to put my hand up on the left side because that's where the door is going to be. The door, depending on whether the door swings closed automatically versus you needing to close it, you may not know until you get to that door. But if you're the guide and you're opening the door and it's not closing, then the guide needs to continue moving through the door so that the traveler can then shut the door. You as the guide are not responsible for closing the door. It's can lead to an awkward scenario when you're turning around and reaching for that door. The traveler can do that by finding the door, trailing it with their free hand, finding the handle, and then closing it So you as the guide need to kind of slow down and wait to make sure they've closed the door before you continue moving. So again, the main thing to think about here with doors is the guide needs to determine, is the door going away or in, towards you or away from you? You know, think about what word makes sense for you. And then is it going to the left or the right? Okay. And then the next piece of this guiding is chairs, how to guide someone to a chair. The guide should always approach the chair from the front or the side. Make sure that when you're guiding the traveler, that the traveler is lined up properly at the chair and versus your body as the guide. So once you've got their the travelers lined up to either the side or the back of the chair, you need to let them know, okay, I've just guided you to the back of the chair. You might describe the chair. This chair has no arms, or it might have wheels, or this is a bar stool, or, you know, just letting them know kind of the main feature of that chair. And you can even, as a guide, give them a reference point, like there could be a table that the chair is facing, letting them know. And then the guide would then place their arm, the guiding arm, on the back of the chair, and then the traveler can just trail their hand down their guide's arm to meet the guide's hand. That way you know where the back of the chair is. So in picture 8 here of my slide, we have the guide, or it looks like maybe the student is clearing the chair. We teach students to clear chairs to make sure they're not sitting on anything that they might not see. It's also good to place a hand on a table if you are seated next to one to make sure that you don't bump your head or anything on the table as you sit down. So it's often, I've seen people try to, you know, do overly help in these scenarios. I think less is better with this, and letting the student find the seat, pull the seat out themselves, sit down. They can get up out of the chair themselves, you know, unless there's really a situation where the student can't do that because of physical limitations. That's something different. But I'm talking about someone that, you know, can easily sit in a chair and get up. This is related to that. So stairs is the next piece of guiding. So when you get to a stairway, you want to tell the guide needs to tell the traveler if you're approaching stairs that are going up or down. That's really important. And I like to say, if you're approaching like a flight of stairs versus just a few steps, you can let them know we're coming to a flight of stairs going up. You don't need to count the stairs. If it's just a couple stairs, you might say we're coming to 3 steps going up, but typically you don't really need to count. The traveler you want to have on the handrail if there is one. So you let them know there's a handrail, guide them so that they're on the handrail side of the steps. You as the guide would then stop at that first step and let the traveler come right up next to you side by side. So now both of you are standing with your toes touching the first step of the stair. The guide will always walk one step ahead of the traveler. This again is so that they can alert the traveler of anything ahead when approaching the landing or a step. So the next piece would just be for the guide to step up, and then the traveler begins to step. And as the traveler steps, the guide steps. You want to match your pace. Always the guide is matching their pace with the traveler. When the guide gets to the landing, remember they're a step ahead, so they're going to let the traveler know I'm at the landing, and then that means the traveler has one more step. That takes some practice sometimes because you might think you're both at the landing. When you say landing, you want to make sure you as a traveler take one last step. Same with going down. The travel guide would be at the landing going down, and then the traveler has one last step down. Sometimes handrails will flatten out at the bottom. They don't always, but that could be a cue. So something to think about. So that was human guide techniques in general, an overview of what the guide and the traveler do. And here's where the fun happens now. How do we adapt all of this to our current social distancing measures? So this next slide is what we've come up with here at our team of O&Ms at Braille Institute. We've tried to get creative with how to continue to receive and provide the human guide techniques. So at no means is this going to replace the prior techniques that we went over, because that is always going to be the safest and most efficient. But if you are in a situation where you need to be guided and you really are trying to limit your exposure to the guide or the traveler's germs, then we've come up with some things to think about. So this first piece is going to discuss some techniques and strategies for person-to-person physical contact. You as the guide and as the traveler want to be wearing masks, of course, is a very important piece of this. Then if you do not have a mask as the guide, maybe you as the traveler can carry around some extra masks, so that way when you are asking for help, you can ensure that your guide would have that. Sometimes people want to use gloves. You might consider carrying around an extra set of gloves, depending on what you're needing to use to limit the touch of your guiding, either the hand or the student's or traveler's hand. So in the first picture here, we have the person that's being guided, the traveler, behind the guide with a glove on, and their hand is extended to straight, and the hand of the traveler is placed on the back of their guide. So the upper back, that way they can stand directly behind them and have as much distance as they can from their guide. So that's what we put in place for this first kind of modification of person to person. So remember, the traditional way would be to clasp the upper arm and have just maybe a half a step behind. This looks a little bit more like what you would do in a narrow passage. So the next piece of this is to think of ways to supplement the space between you and your guide with some sort of tether. So we've thought about this, and maybe some of you have some other ideas, but we thought of using a spare cane as a tether, or maybe the cane that you normally use. If you're really needing assistance, you may need to use that cane as the tether, but ideally you would have a spare cane that you could then use. And when we say tether, we mean some sort of device that can be used to hold on to one end, and then the guide holds on to the other end, and it kind of links the two of you together. So we have a picture of someone using a sweater, even a shawl, a jacket, sometimes a belt could even work. Maybe someone wants to create their own T-bar or some sort of device to hold on to, because this will allow a lot more space. If you think about a cane being maybe 50 inches, that could allow you a little more space between you and your guide. Again, another thing to think about, though, is the germs, especially if that cane has been down on the ground. You want to have gloves, maybe some disinfectant wipes, something to wrap around the end of the cane so that you're not having to touch it. So think about carrying some extra things like that with you, maybe a backpack with some of these cleaning products. And to the NFB organization, NFB, National Federation for the Blind, they do give out free canes. So if you are needing a spare cane, I think that's a great place to get a cane. They offer free fiberglass rigid canes, and you can order them through their website on nfb.org, and they will mail one directly to you. So that's a great resource to know about. And another tether we thought of was to use an umbrella. So you could use a long umbrella, again, holding one end as the guide and the other end as the traveler. And maybe you can even use that umbrella in the meantime when you're traveling independently. Maybe you need some shade, or maybe it's raining. Definitely not here where I am, but could be somewhere where you live. So thinking about that as a possibility. We thought about shopping carts as giving proper 6 feet distance. So when you're maybe in a grocery store or a store that has shopping carts, if you are the guide, you can stand at the end of the cart and pull that cart along as the traveler is pushing the cart from the front. Or should I say, when I say the front, I should say the front where you're typically standing with the little basket and the handle. You have the traveler there, and then the guide would be at the end of the cart, kind of pulling and guiding the cart. So that would offer a little more distance between you and your guide. And the other thing is that we mentioned the use of a cane or a walker while walking with someone with a guide can give extra protection and information. So even though you're getting guided, you can still use your cane, and it's definitely recommended to continue to use your cane if you're a cane user when someone's guiding you, because not only is it giving you extra protection and information, it's also showing people that you have vision loss, and maybe people are giving you a little more space because of that. Some limitations to all of this is that the guide needs to have good verbal description skills. So that doesn't always come easily, and it takes some practice. So be patient with your guide. If you're not understanding the guide's description, you just ask them to clarify or say it in a different way. Like we were talking about with doors, you might not quite understand what they mean by the door goes out, or I don't know, thinking of different scenarios where the description is not as, or maybe they're not giving you information that you need. Like we're coming up to some stairs. Well, you need to know, are they going up or down? So you may need to ask your guide for a little more information, but hopefully the guide is learning with you, and you as the traveler, it's important that you also know what the guide needs to do so that you can teach someone that may not know these techniques already. These tethers that we talked about, they can be difficult because they allow the traveler to get pretty far away, which is what we're intending, but that might mean that there's not as much control. So also, if you're guiding someone with a far distance between you and them, and you take a big wide turn, you can imagine that they're going to swing out pretty far too. So keeping all of that in mind if you're guiding with a tether, it's not ideal, but it's something that you can adapt for different scenarios where you really are forced to do this. If you have a guide dog, again, you want to avoid people petting your dog, so you can tell the guide, that we will follow you, and the guide can just stand in front of you. If you have the guide dog, even 6 feet apart could work, and then you as the traveler and your guide dog can follow along without even touching the guide at all. So let's see. These techniques are not at all exhaustive. I'm sure there's a lot more creative things that a lot of you on the call today have thought about or are using, and we would love to hear what those are. So I'm going to pause because I've been talking for the last 40 minutes or so. I want to make sure that everyone is following along, and if you do have questions about anything that I've said, you have any clarification needed, or maybe you have something that you've done that I didn't talk about that is working. Maybe you've come up with a scenario that you're needing assistance with. We've got a lot of smart brains here that we can all work together. So I'm going to allow people now the chance to unmute. And before you ask and shout out, I just would ask that you say your name first, and we will do our best to address everyone as they come. So just remember to announce your name, and then we'll get your question. And we also have a chat box.
Yes.
Using the app. You can put your questions in the chat box, which
Brianna,
I think Karen has.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we do have Jennifer Perry has a few messages going back to the human guide. Picture 7. You want to, I don't know if you can go back to that.
For the initial human guide?
Yes.
Okay. Let me see if I can find that. Human guide techniques. Okay. Picture 7?
Yes.
All right.
So the question, the statement says, in picture 7, the traveler has her open palm on the door. A safer way is to use the back of her hand with her fingers curled.
Love that. Yes. Good catch. I love that you caught that on the photo. You're right. We definitely recommend that when you're navigating a doorway, even anything where you're trailing your hand on a surface, we use the back of our hand and you curl your fingers in and just mostly use the knuckle to avoid jamming your fingers, in this case, into the door jamb or possibly getting them caught in the door. So this looks like maybe it's right before, I'll just defend the photo. Right before the student made contact with the door, the hand is reaching out in front of their face with the palm facing out in that upper protective technique. Once the palm finds the doorway, you want to flip it so that the back of the hand is making contact with the door, and then your fingers will curl in. Yeah. Thank you for that.
And also to kind of defend that picture, I know this student has some remaining vision, so I know he was able to see the door, you know, to reach out. But yeah,
that's a good point to mention to some of these people on today's call who may not know that. Any other questions from the chat?
And then for picture 8, Jennifer also says, also before they sit, a nice idea for many is to be sure that the back of both knees touch the chair before attempting to sit.
Great, yes. And I do that with couches or benches. I like to guide my student right up to that edge of the couch or the bench, let their knees tap it, just like our participant was saying. And then that way they have a reference of where that piece of furniture is. So that's another great tip.
And then for the last one, she also mentioned when you were describing stairs and landings for deafblind, or if it's loud, instead of saying landing, a cue that we have used on stairs is to ask the guide to pause at the top or bottom landing.
That's a great cue. Yeah, there's different physical cues that you can think about as well. Like we mentioned with narrow passage, when the arm of the guide goes behind them, that can be a cue that we're coming to a narrow space, and then you'll step behind your guide. Along with stairs, sometimes the guide's arm will extend forward to cue the person that you're at the landing. So there are a couple other ideas out there for physical cues. That's great. Any other chat questions?
That is it right now.
Okay, great. Thank you for those questions. Anyone else? No, there's no such thing as a dumb question here. So please ask, and I'm happy to repeat myself for anyone that needs it. We want to make sure everyone feels supported in this webinar. You can just unmute yourself and announce your name.
Yes, this is Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Another item you can use for distance is, you know, the noodles that you use in the pool.
Oh, great. Yep.
Yep.
I love that.
Pick a color and there you go.
pool noodle, and no
Yep.
one would laugh at you at all.
Yeah, and they come in different lengths and sizes, so you don't have to have this big thick one because they come in thinner sizes. So
Oh, that's a fun idea. That
yeah,
reminded me of some colleagues of our, or I should say, fellow O&M students in South Africa. They were working with children there, and they put hula hoops around them. They adapted a hula hoop with a fabric to lay over them, and it was creating like a physical barrier. So the hula hoop would stay around them as they walked, and in case they tapped something or someone, they would not be able to get any closer than that. So I thought that was a creative thing, especially for these kids. They might actually enjoy that.
And just for clarification, Chris, are you Chris Mendoza?
no,
Oh, okay. What's your last name, Chris?
I'm Torres, Torres.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris, for that comment of the pool noodle. Any other creative ideas out there for handling the human guide techniques while social distancing?
Jennifer also asked if you've heard of the Ramble tag. I know you like.
Oh, yes, Ramble tag. Thank you. So I was going to bring up another document that I have that does mention the Ramble tag. So let me pull that up and we'll go through that. One moment here while I pull up the PowerPoint. And the Ramble tag, I believe, is from the UK. And it is a device that was adapted for just this purpose of guiding people with vision loss. So I'm going to share my screen now with you. One moment. I'm going to scroll down to the Ramble tag. So they have a website, Ramble tag, so RAMBLETAG.co.uk. So there is a lightweight harness that they developed with Velcro, kind of like what you would imagine the cuff of like a blood pressure thing they use on the arm of the guide, and there's a little handle on it. So if you go to their website, you can find out more on the Ramble tag. And if I can pull it up here, I might even be able to share my screen with you. But again, you can even do a quick Google search of Ramble tag, or I've never used one myself, but I have been hearing about it. And so it sounds like an interesting invention. And I'm going to go back to the beginning of this slide here. There are some videos on YouTube that demonstrate the human guide techniques, so I can share those in a follow-up email with everyone on today's webinar, because it might be helpful to share those with family members or friends who may have not attended today, or maybe for yourself to kind of review some of the things we talked about. I'm limited in my ability to share with you these techniques with another person, since it's just me here today. But in the future, if you have the opportunity to attend an in-person training, it's really great to do this and practice it in person with someone. Maybe if you're attending this today with a friend or family member, think about doing this together right afterwards to keep it fresh, and also be able to really have that muscle memory of what you do physically with the guide and the traveler. And you can even swap it out. A lot of times when I teach these trainings, I have the person that has vision put on a mask, a sleep shade, and they would experience what it's like to be visually impaired, maybe even wear some sort of occluder that would be designed to mimic the different impairment, because a lot of people do have some usable vision. So it doesn't necessarily need to be full darkness, but for the purpose of learning some of these techniques, you could just have a full blindfold on and learn these techniques yourself as the guide. And it can really be a great way to learn hands-on like that. Another couple things I wanted to mention here: when you're planning to go out in a pandemic to some of these stores, you may not know what protocols are in place. A lot of the times they have signs out on the door for people to read, but if you have vision loss, obviously you're not seeing that sign, or maybe you are, but you can't read it too well. So I like to recommend that you call ahead. Call whatever destination you're planning to go to, whether it's a grocery store, a doctor's office, and gather that information up front. They might say, oh, we have a designated door for entry, a designated door for exit. Maybe there's someone that can assist you when you get there. Just help you stay safe and avoid an awkward situation without being able to read the sign. There are special shopping hours a lot of times for seniors or people with disabilities. You can find out if that applies. I recommend keeping extra hand sanitizer around, that spare cane, other cleaning products, maybe some extra gloves, extra masks, all of that. Maybe keeping it in a backpack so that your hands are free. If you need to enter an area that you're really worried about having a lot of germs, some people have worn 2 sets of clothing, so that way when they exit that area, they can discard of the top layer and place it in a bag. I know medical people do that with their clothing, so there could be something to do. I know another thing that could help would be to have just like a little grab bag where you stock with all of these materials and just keep it handy by the front of your door. Having a little cleaning zone where you can enter the home and just keep that clean right away, wipe it down, take off your shoes, keeping it all kind of in that one little area could be good. And this applies to, oh, go ahead.
Brianna, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. There was a comment in the chat.
Sure.
And
what's that?
It said, wouldn't using disposable sleeves through Amazon or sun protection sleeves be just as useful as the Ramble tag? Ramble tag doesn't provide much distance.
Right. The Ramble tag does not. It would be the same distance that you are normally when you're holding the back of the guide's arm. It's just that you wouldn't be touching them. So yes, that could be another thing to consider, is to get sleeves, another piece of clothing to place on your arm as the guide, and then that way the traveler is not actually touching you. So that is a good point. Ramble tag might have their reasons as to why their product is better than that, but anyways, it's something to think about. And was there another comment or question, Karen?
That was it.
Okay. I'm just reviewing a couple things here that apply to both human guide techniques, whether or not you're social distancing. You just really want to have good communication skills, ask questions that help others. One second, I lost my slide. Okay, well, ask, I'm going to change my view here because, okay, there we go. Are people still seeing my slide? Maybe I lost it. Come back to me, slide. Nope, that's not it. Sorry, everyone. Well, while I'm messing around, if you have a question, that now would be a good time because I'm needing to locate my last slide. Any other questions?
This is Ron.
Hi, Ron.
Hey, if I understood correctly, for going upstairs, the traveler would be on the right, holding the railing with his or her right hand and holding the guide's elbow with her or his left hand. But if you have a cane in your right hand, I suppose the thing to do would be to ask the guide to hold it for you while you hang on to the railing. Would that be the right thing to do?
That's a great question. Yeah, the cane can sometimes get in the way in some of these techniques. Going through doorways is another thing where sometimes that cane can be cumbersome and you have to figure out where to place it, sometimes in the crux of your arm, and sometimes having the guide hold it. Exactly. So in that case that you described with the stairs, if there's a handrail, then yes, having the guide holding the cane could be a great way to adapt to that. Also, sometimes a student might just need to be guided, I don't know, to the stairs, and then they might feel comfortable going up the stairs with their cane and then meeting them at the landing, depending on the student. So they may not need to be guided throughout that whole process. You can think about scenarios where maybe they just need assistance getting to the stairs, and then once they found the handrail, they could use their cane to navigate up or down. So we have someone mention something about their tucking their cane. Let me see what that says. The cane can be tucked under the thumb of the hand holding onto the guide, raised sufficiently so that the tip doesn't contact it if ascending the stairs. Oh, that's a great little feedback. Thank you, Cynthia.
Idea. Good idea.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for that. So let me see if I can come back to my slide again. Okay. So talked about good communication, asking for good detailed verbal description of the surrounding areas. You can ask your guide to walk ahead of you or to the side of you, depending on what kind of remaining residual vision you have. So that way, maybe you don't even need to touch your guide. If you have enough vision, you might be able to just follow them along. Maybe the guide, if this is planned ahead, you could have your guide wear a certain color that stands out for you, following their shirt. If it's orange versus black versus white versus red, thinking about what color would make a difference for you. Maybe even carrying that shirt in your backpack to hand out to your guide. These are all spontaneous thoughts that I'm having right now in the moment. So if anyone else is having some ideas occurring to them, please share. And another thing I've seen with some of the O&M instructors on the call today, you may know of what I'm talking about when I say the Juno walk with a guide dog. We often use something to kind of be, what would we call, like a practice walk with our students who are thinking about getting a guide dog. It's designed to mimic what it would be like to hold on to the harness of a guide dog. So it's this PVC rectangular shape where the student would hold one end of the PVC and the guide would hold the other. And that could also be something you consider using as a form of guiding. Another kind of tether idea. I think we've covered most of what I had put together here on our slide today. So I did mention in my slide that practicing, well, again, practicing all of these with someone is great if you have that ability. Also practicing soliciting assistance or asking for help, that can be a challenge for a lot of us. So maybe practicing that, having some role plays with someone you feel comfortable with so that you kind of have that verbiage down or that script down for when you do need assistance or for when you are needing to ask someone for help with guiding. How do you do that? What are some ways in which you can approach someone, describing what you need from your guide? Sometimes it all makes sense in your head, but then when it comes out verbally, it's a whole nother thing. So kind of practicing that out loud with someone or even to yourself can be helpful. And these guide techniques are what orientation mobility specialists are trained to teach. So again, you can always reach out to your local orientation mobility specialist. If you're a Braille Institute student, reach out to your appropriate O&M specialist. I'm Brianna at the Santa Barbara Center, and we have several other O&M specialists at all of our other Braille Institutes. So we all work together, and we want to help and support you during these times, and also learn from you on how you're adapting to these strange times. So please.
Brianna,
yes.
I'm so sorry. We have a couple more comments.
Great. Let's hear it.
So Cynthia Lashinsky wrote, if visually following someone, use something like a belt or collar, some fixed point that will clearly indicate if the guide encounters a change in elevation. It is difficult to detect if just watching a large area of clothing, like the back generally, but more easily detected when watching a specific point. So to visually monitor the belt, collar, or other fixed point.
That's great. Yeah, or maybe a hat on the person's head. Maybe you could design, maybe Ramble Tag should design a special shirt with a giant target in the back. Maybe you could have a black shirt with a white circle. Stare at that. Yeah. I like that.
And then Leanne wanted to remind you about the Heinz brake.
Oh, great. Leanne, how are you doing? Would you like to review the Heinz brake?
Discuss it?
I would love that. Leanne is our O&M instructor. She's our guru. She's been at Braille for how long? 30, how many years?
36 years.
Oh, wow. So I would love to hear how you describe that, Leanne, if you're comfortable. The Heinz brake. What is the Heinz brake?
Heinz brake is when, I'm sure those of you who are visually impaired and legally blind, that one of the things that you deal with is that there's some people who want to help you and they come up from behind you and they start pushing you. Now, this is a system which was developed through Heinz, Illinois at the VA in the way of how to keep someone from pushing. Well, they're still going to start to push you, but what you learn to do is you turn in towards the person on the side that they are pushing you. The natural instinct is to pull away from them, but they can still hold on to you really, really well that way. But if you turn in towards somebody, sooner or later, they have to let go because they can't hold on anymore. This is actually a self-defense move that they use in different types of karate and other kinds of things. Always learning to turn in towards your opponent. Well, this isn't really an opponent. It's just a person who's trying to help, but they haven't asked and they haven't said anything. And then it's you just turn in, and you can either say, if you're wanting some help, you know what, let me take your arm. And normally the person can see, not always, because that's why we call it human guide, but they must have better techniques with a cane or something that they're guiding. So you go, let you guide, you put you out in the front instead of me out in the front, because I can't see well and I'm actually feeling a little uncertain, so I need somebody's arm. It also might be, it's normally family members that do this. So the more you start turning in and practicing, the better it will go. I will tell you, this does not feel natural when you first do it. So it's really, really important to practice this at home with your loved ones and tell them, please do not take what I'm saying personally, but I've got to turn in towards you and say, you know what, let me take your arm. And I need you to try and push me ahead as if, you know, because the more you practice it, the more natural it will be. And then when it becomes natural to do, it's like, okay, and people, you know, it's like you can do it naturally and then they feel more at ease and go, oh, okay, let me follow that person. Okay, does that
Thank you, Leanne. That's great. That's the Heinz brake. So that can also happen with family members or even strangers, where you might have this scenario where someone just comes up and doesn't ask you for help, or if you need help, and just grabs you. What do you do in that scenario? I know there's people who might address this in other ways, but we recommend to use the Heinz brake for that. You can break the grasp really quickly and then avoid being in an unsafe situation where the person is trying to pull you or, you know, take you somewhere you're not wanting to go. So thanks for the reminder on the Heinz brake. And any other questions, comments? Anyone want to share a situation that's happened where you think someone could learn from that? Or any other creative ideas? We've got a bunch of people here from all backgrounds, so it's great to learn from each other.
Hi, my name's Jamie.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi, I'm a little bit of a unique situation. I have some vision, but it is very low, and I'm in line, so to speak, to get a guide dog from Guiding Eyes for the Blind Special Mobility Department, because I also have pretty severe cerebral palsy. So I use two support canes usually, or a walker. It's actually a pull behind walker to get around. So I need sighted guide assistance at all times, but they're kind of, with Guiding Eyes, they're doing a little bit of a unique way of doing things for me. They're going to get me the dog, you know, trying to match me with the best dog possible, but I don't yet have really hardly any O&M skills. And so they're going to kind of work backwards. They're going to help me get the dog because I need the dog to get O&M, but I also need O&M to get the dog. So they're going to, you know, try helping me to get my dog first. And then in the hopes that that will give me enough ability to be able to move around on my own to get like the O&M orientation skills and stuff. But they really did recommend that I get as much as I could beforehand. And of course, things were hard enough for me before COVID, and now it's even worse. So I'm wondering if there's any like resources out there where I could get like, you know, O&M, you know, skills and like how to read traffic by ear and such remotely with instructors or anything like that. That anybody's aware of.
So great. Thank you so much for sharing your situation, because I'm sure people can learn from that. I want to touch on a couple of your comments and questions. You mentioned, can you get services, O&M services? So you can contact the Braille Institute, and depending on where you live, we are providing remote O&M services right now. It's all done, you know, either through the phone or a Teams platform like this. And you can learn some of these skills that we teach, although when it comes to street crossings and scenarios that really require in-person instruction, we're limited on what we can cover, but you could kind of learn some of these basics. And I know I have a colleague that's going to be discussing some street crossing techniques. Karen, do you want to mention anything on what you plan to cover in that class?
I'm so sorry, for tomorrow?
Well, this student was asking about learning some of these skills that we teach as O&M instructors over this online kind of remote instruction, and like street crossing skills. You were going to teach a class, I think, in the future on that. What is that going to cover?
Sorry, I just misunderstood the question.
No problem.
Yes, so my class will be on basically just intersection analysis, just breaking it down step by step, because there are so many steps that go into it, and so much information that you need to know prior to going into street crossing. So for example, it's just going to break down like what is a shape, you know, what is a control, you know, and just kind of break it down step by step, all the things that go into intersection analysis. So that way, when you do get to work with an O&M one-on-one, you already have, it's kind of like a prerequisite class. Like you will already have that background information. So that way, when you do go one-on-one, you already know, like, okay, I know I need to listen for traffic, you know, what is a surge, you know, and it'll just make street crossing a little bit easier. So
that's great. So Jamie, if you're not a student already of Braille, you can reach out to someone at Braille Institute and they can see if you would qualify for our free services. Otherwise, I do know that there are various webinars out there that are offered through some of these other organizations. So I don't know offhand of any that would cover streets crossings or cane travel necessarily, but I do know that we do have some coming up in our own Braille Institute. So
Okay.
You can reach out to us.
Okay, because I know that two things there. I know one of the things that they recommended, they said like route planning and like even orienting myself in order to execute a route from, you know, A to Z and back to A again, start to finish and back to the entry point would be something. So like, are there any resources or classes that are going to be taught about that? And then also just really quick, I wanted to know what my local center would, I was a student at Rancho Mirage in 2017, but I understand that they've closed, so I don't know who my sort of local center would be anymore. I'm in Moreno Valley.
So we can probably set you up with someone at either our neighborhood center in Riverside, Coachella Valley, or even, you know, a lot of times our students are participating in classes here in Santa Barbara, even though they live in Los Angeles or Anaheim. So right now is kind of a unique thing where you can access all the different centers. So anyone, any center at this point, you can reach out to us and we will connect you with whoever that person is.
Cool.
Yeah. So thanks for letting us know, and we'll make a note. I think doing something with route planning, incorporating the orientation piece to some of our webinars could be great. We are putting together classes for the upcoming new semester, and so we can maybe think about making sure that that's a part of the curriculum. So that's great information. Thank you for that. And we've got time for more questions or comments.
Hi, this is Maria. A lot of people like to call me Rebecca. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi. I had a question. So I'm looking for work, and so I've been going to a lot of, you know, job interviews, or I have to go to a lot of job interviews, and then I'm also having to go to like other unfamiliar places like food things, and then toy drives because, you know, the holidays are coming up, and I have 4 kids. So my youngest was actually born on the day after the epidemic, March 16th. So
wow,
that's kind of crazy. But and I know Leanne. I was actually a former student of hers. But do you have any suggestions for me besides the, you know, extra masks and extra sanitizer and extra, you know, extra stuff? Because I know, like, yesterday there was a walker that was donated to me, and I went to go pick it up, and I come home and my other half is like, we need to clean this. Really good, really good. So
so your question is, are
do
there
you have any other suggestions for me, like if I'm going to all these unfamiliar places,
right,
like epidemic? And
well, I think a big piece of that is to call ahead, like I mentioned, and see if there's someone there that can assist you, or getting information up front before you arrive is always good if possible. And let me
think. Because one of the places that I went to yesterday, they changed the rules of where you have to go, like, you know, because at first when the epidemic started, you had to go in through the back, and now I guess they're starting to let people go through the front. So yeah, I now I see what you're saying about calling ahead.
Right. And maybe there's someone there that can anticipate you coming,
Yeah.
and because a lot of times people are short on staff, so if they can
Yeah.
plan for that,
Yeah.
that could work. Any other tips for this student, Rebecca? If anyone else has anything that they think, you know, mentioning the tether as another option, cleaning, maybe, and how do you approach new environments that you're not familiar with?
So Rebecca, more than anything, plan, and plan again. You know, call, and even the grocery stores that you visited and you've already been to during the coronavirus, call them again, but anytime before you go. Don't think, well, it's going to be like last time.
Okay.
You can't assume anything these days. It keeps changing. So I tell people, it's like, be prepared. It's it's like, okay, I'm prepared. Am I prepared for my earthquake? I mean, we just had a big one down here. Yeah. So that got me, that it's like, okay, do I have my earthquake thing all updated? And it was like, okay, no, I need to go do a few things. So that's one thing about the smaller quakes. It keeps me up that way. But in the way of human guide work, there are, I tell people that it's like, do things before you exit that door, and be prepared for when you get home. When you get home, you know, like for instance, before you leave, make it a point that it's like, okay, and that means you got to start sooner. And I know that's hard with the kids. Okay.
Yeah.
That, you know, it's like, okay, I've got to have wipes. I've got to have extra gloves. I've got to have extra mask. And the extra masks are for in case you show up someplace, you've got the mask on, but somebody else doesn't. And you can say, you know, we have to be in really close quarters. Would you mind wearing a mask? Because I'm in the high risk area because I have so many kids and I have a newborn.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
So there's nothing wrong with asking people. You know, it's like, okay, you can ask nicely and then hopefully they will go with that. Then in turn, you can also maybe take some old socks, tube socks, or, you know, really big socks that your husband has used and put holes in. Okay. And take those along and they have them nice and clean, but put those on, you know, like for instance, you might put it on yourself, on like a sleeve, a fake sleeve on your arm. And then in turn, when somebody takes your arm, it's like, okay, I know I can just throw that away when we're done.
Yeah, that's true.
So disposable sleeves is what I call them. What can you make into a disposable sleeve? It's amazing what we can out of old, you know, we've all been going through our closets and doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But also have with you that it's like, okay, well, I've got my wipes, I've got the face mask, I've got gloves, so I'm prepared. Now, when I get home, I make it a point that even my cane, because I know you're a good cane user, you're really good. And I tell you, you know how many canes I have in the back end of my car. All of them have been disinfected now to the point that I've never disinfected. You know, it's like I'm going, wow. But have something at your door or inside your door or outside your door, that your front door, so that it's like as soon as you come in, you can clean your cane. And you're cleaning the whole cane. You're cleaning the handle, the shaft, but you definitely want to clean that tip because who knows, you know, it's like, okay, well, this is a good thing to get into practice with, because it's like we should have been, I'm believing myself that I should have been doing that with my canes all the time, you know, in the way of sanitizing them. But you know, now it's like, okay, well, now it's becoming second nature, so which is a good idea. But that's, you know, especially with your kids, and if you're trying to find, you know, I know you take around a stroller and all that kind of stuff that you have to do all over again. And then your eldest is much older.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's going to be 14 already.
Wow. Oh, sweetheart. You're busy.
Yeah.
So, but definitely you want to have all that kind of stuff available. Plan, and plan again. If that means that it's like, okay, the kids are asleep, now I can do it.
Yes.
And it's like, I know it's really hard with a wee little one because you want to sleep. You have no sleep. So it's kind of, yeah. And my heart goes out to you. But
Thank you.
yeah, hopefully that helped everybody.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thanks everyone for your participation, and I want to honor everyone's time. So we're almost to the end. I want to say that I will send a follow-up email with some of the information that we covered today, but I also want to direct you all to check out the Braille Institute's website, where we have the Human Guide Techniques pamphlet that I was showing earlier, the one for just typical human guide techniques, and then also the one designed to adapt to the social distancing. So both of those are on our Braille Institute website. If you go to the, I believe it's, let me think of how the step-by-step is for that. I think you have to go to services and then click on orientation and mobility. And then from there on the orientation mobility page, there'll be different pamphlets there. So we are going to stop the recording now.
Brianna,
And
really quick,
yes.
do you want to promote the move-a-thon?
Great. Yes, we have actually several fun things coming up. Let me see. I actually have some written down. So the whole month of October, we are promoting White Cane Awareness Day. So we have various webinars that are orientation mobility related, along with a month-long virtual move-a-thon, which has now, what is today, the 8th day, but you're welcome to join in at any time. We are trying to promote physical activity among the visually impaired community. You do not need to be visually impaired. You can be a family member, friend. You can register on our website for Braille Institute Move-a-thon, and you can participate as much as you'd like. There's no real goal other than what you make for yourself. Maybe it's a daily goal of 10 minutes of whatever movement you can, whether it's dancing, walking, running. I know we have some students that are really taking this on and have a lot of minutes. It's recorded by minutes, so there's a way to track your activity log there on our registration. Once you've created that for yourself, you'll get emailed a way to track your activity. We also have next week on Monday a webinar that will highlight the WeWalk cane, which is an electronic cane that is also works with a smart device. So it has its own navigation app that is free. You can download that ahead of time, the WeWalk app. That way, when you follow along in this webinar, you can kind of find out more about this cane. We have White Cane Awareness Day as well coming up on the 15th. And this will be a great day to all come together virtually celebrating the White Cane Awareness Day. We'll have the Lions Club there to share about how they've been instrumental in integrating the white cane into our society. And we will have students sharing on how the white cane has helped them. So that should be a fun thing. And there's even more than what I just said, all listed on our Braille Institute website. So take a look there. If you're interested, register online and go ahead and we're going to stop the recording now.